You know, when you're a presenter, when you kind of do articles or, you know, presentations on sports training and fitness related topics, you kind of have this conundrum because you want to teach something that you think is relevant and important, and therefore something that's been talked about for hundreds of years by millions of people. And then the other thing that pulls on you is that you want to do something that seems kind of novel or unique or compelling, and sometimes trying to merge those things is kind of difficult. So as I was thinking about what I would present here today, I'm kind of looking over all the things, and I mean, I've been presenting for years and years and years, and I've written like 800 articles about, you know, who knows what. And I'm just thinking, like, what can we talk about that's relevant but that hasn't been just beat to death? And I'm looking at sets and reps and biomechanics and exercise selection and periodization and recovery and all these different things. And somehow, and I don't know how this really occurred to me, but, you know, when you're in the gym lifting weights, you're doing something called progressive resistance training. And it just kind of occurred to me at some point that this whole idea of progression, or how do you know, making your workouts more difficult, is really kind of vague. You know, when's the last time you read an article about, you know, what is the methodology of progressing from one workout to the next and making those workouts progressively more challenging? So, you know, it just strikes me, you know, as important. And when you look at all the gurus out in the field and all the experts, and if you think about all the people that you kind of maybe follow and read their articles and see their seminars and so forth, if you look at all the various kind of parameters, let me just ask you something. Do most of the experts out there agree on the ideal exercises that you should be performing for any given objective? I mean, I think, and I'm not just talking about the experts that you agree with, I'm just talking about experts, people in authority out there. Do experts agree on the ideal amount of intensity, the ideal or optimal percentage of 1 rep max, or how close you should come to failure or beyond failure? There's a guy, oh, he died, but beyond failure training, Trevor Smith, or, no, I'm not kidding, it just occurred to me right now. He's got this thing, it's called BFT, beyond failure training, but he died. He used to live in Las Vegas, so you see him in the supermarket. He's like 5'4", 360, you know, and you know, beyond failure. So, but do people agree? I mean, he was huge, though. He was huge. Do experts agree on the ideal volume? How many sets per exercise? You know, how long the duration of workouts? What's the ideal length of a workout? You know, tempo, frequency. How many days a week should you train? Look at powerlifting, right? The traditional paradigm in powerlifting, 3 days a week. Now you have Louis Simmons. Okay, so do experts agree on the ideal frequency of training? I mean, I don't even agree from 1 month to the other. I disagree with myself, you know, no less other experts. So do you guys do the time under tension, you know, thing, right? You guys read Body for Life? Each rep should be long enough to, I am building my body for life. And then, do you follow what I mean? The better one, and I mention this sometimes, the better one that works a lot better is make checks payable to Charles Staley, P.O. Box, just in case. If you're fooling around with your tempos, it works better. But do experts agree on periodization? You read, you know, Verkhoshansky and Sif and Bompa, and there's, you know, do experts agree on rest intervals? How long you should rest between sets? Don't agree on any of this stuff. But what is the one thing that all authorities or experts or gurus involved in resistance training, the one thing they all agree on is that your workouts must gradually become more difficult over time? You on board with that idea? I mean, do you know anyone who says, okay, here's the workout and you just do it forever? I mean, I haven't seen that. Although, I mean, where's Julianne? Can somebody make me, because that might be good for next year when I'm struggling. All right, so look, it's important. Your workouts have to become gradually more difficult. So it's important, and yet there really are not studies on this. I mean, I'm not like a real scientist geek kind of guy, but looking for studies on PubMed and all this stuff. There's no studies. There's nothing. There's studies on 2 days a week versus 3 days a week. There's studies on 1 set versus 3. There's studies on short rest intervals versus long intervals. There's nothing. There's nothing. I don't see any books on the subject. I've never seen anyone write an article on the subject. So, I don't know. I found a position statement of sorts in the NSCA manual, Essential Strength Conditioning. Increase the resistance or weight of an exercise when you're able to complete all repetitions of the last set without muscle fatigue. I mean, I don't know what that means. Like, what do you mean fatigue? What's fatigue? I mean, you know, could it be more vague? And the answer is no. Okay, so that's my. Oh crap! All right, look. I don't know how that got on there. Nick, this was I was supposed to do that. This is the exercise you were asking me about, and I was supposed to email this to you, and somehow it got in my. But don't use chalk. Just that's the main. So I don't know if I put the email. So, all right. So let's just take a step back for a second. I apologize for that. So stuff happens, man. It really does. Look, why is progression necessary? Why is it of such critical importance? Why is there the foundational myth of Milo of Crotona? You know, the guy who lifted a calf once a day on his back until the calf became a full-grown cow, and then he could lift 2,000 pounds or whatever. Where, you know, that's the foundational myth of resistance training that most of you already know. Well, it's because your 1RMs, or your maximum capability over time, increases, right? So you're not like a machine where if you just work it to death and it breaks. If you can find what I would kind of call, there's a sweet spot here in terms of adaptation. So look, hopefully you can see this, but you know, if you've got a timeline here and this is intensity, you've got a little bell curve, and you've got a sweet spot in that bell curve. So if you're over to the left on that bell curve, the intensity is not sufficient to have any impact on your body. If you're over here, you're getting injured and you need to talk to Dr. Cobb, you know. So if you find that sweet spot, which is where, you know, you've got sufficient stress to provoke an adaptation in the tissue, but not so strong to, you know, to create injury, that's what you're looking for. But it's kind of a sliding sweet spot, right? So if right now this is 100 pounds and we go, here's your scale, right? So we got 80, 70, and so forth. Then you got 110, 120, 130, and so forth. You know, hopefully in a month, 2 months, hopefully your sweet spot now is going to be sitting over 120. Do you follow? So that's the idea. That what is sufficient to provoke an adaptation today, hopefully, if your training is going the way that it should go, will be insufficient to provoke an adaptation later on. That's the whole reason why this is an important subject to me. Take another step back. If you're not keeping a journal, there's no point in having the discussion. There's no point in having a discussion if you're not keeping a journal. This is my journal. It's meant purely for comedy purposes. If you can read the numbers, okay? It's like my old fantasy training journal, okay? It's okay to dream. It really is. I mean, it's okay to write weird stuff in your journal like this. But look, point being, and Dan John talks about this a lot, if you're not keeping a journal, you can't progress because you don't know what you're progressing upon. And so you got to do this. And I know most of you guys keep a journal, and we got a lot of smart people in the audience, but if you are one of those people who's not keeping a journal, if you will just make that one change in your habit structure, that has the potential to make this whole seminar worthwhile. Okay? So I just wanted to make that point before we go too much further. All right, so if we agree that progression is important, and we understand why progression is important, then the next thing is to ask these two questions in terms of how do you apply this idea. And what we need to know is two things. We need to know what is the methodology, what is the method or the strategy that you're going to use to make those workouts more difficult, and is there more than one strategy? And there is, even though you guys all just use one thing, but I'll show you about 15 here in a little bit. And then what is the optimal rate of increasing the difficulty of workouts? Okay? Okay, so look, do you guys know what the spandex rule is? Anybody know what it is? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. All right, so the application for what we're going to do here is that just because you can use loading, in other words, increasing weight on the bar, that's the one thing that most of us do, and the small amount of literature that you can find on progression talks about do your workout on Monday, next time you do the workout, add 5 pounds or whatever it is, okay, adding weight. That's just one of many progression strategies. It's the one that most people rely on exclusively, but there are problems with it. So, I've got a calendar, I've got a little 2.5 pound plate. and a calculator. So what is somebody give me a training split, a commonly used training split. Whatever it is, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, whatever. Monday you clean and jerk and squat, and Wednesday you snatch and overhead squat or whatever. Friday maybe you do jerks and pulls, whatever it is. Then when you come back to Monday and you're repeating that unit, that's when you're going to look back, say, okay, what did I do last week? And what am I going to do now so that I'm progressing? So are you on board with the idea that for most people, 1 week is the repeatable unit that most people are using, okay? And so would you also agree that in most gyms, a 2.5-pound plate is the smallest plate that you can find, usually. So and it's just a tiny little thing, right? I mean, a lot of guys just don't even look at that, they're going to 5s or 10s or 25s, whatever it is. But so there's 52 weeks in a year, and if you put a 2.5-pound plate on each side of the bar every week, and you do the math, and that's a 260-pound increase on your lift in 1 year. The law of sustainable progression. So, I mean, just to do a poll, how many people have put 260 pounds like on their bench press in the past 12 months? Okay, or their snatch, overhead squat, deadlift, anybody? Squat, tricep kickback. Have you on a squat? I always wonder, how come nobody knows their 1 rep max on a tricep kickback? These are the things that I think about. Oh, how come nobody knows their 1 rep max? Well, okay, I'll answer the question for you because it's freaking dangerous. Here's the thing. People think squatting is dangerous. But when you squat, you have all sorts of muscles participating in that. And so if one muscle isn't up to snuff, the other muscle can help out. Kind of like sports and life and everything. But when you're doing a tricep kickback, if that tricep cannot handle that load, there's kind of nothing else that can kind of step in to pick up. So that's why nobody knows their 1 rep max on tricep kickback. So, which is reminding me, a little Denise Austin update here too. Love Denise Austin. All right, she, just forgive me, but it's good. Okay, it's good. Well, in her book, what was the name of her book? I can't recall, but where she says that the hamstring goes from the hip to the ankle. That was cool. But she was on, did you catch her on Larry King 2 weeks ago? Okay, the ideal diet. Where's Lonnie Lowry? Oh, my wife's picking her up. There's some nutrition guys here. Ideal diet, according to Denise Austin, 50% carb, 25% protein, 20% fat. Okay. So, she said it right on Larry King. Okay. That, you have to admit, like Dave, that's unique.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Is it maybe it's like a metric system thing? I'm not sure. But anyway, do you get my point? Look, even if you are being as conservative as you can possibly be, and you say, well, I'm just going to stick that little 2.5 on the end of the bar, that's 260 pounds a year. So if you are relying exclusively or primarily on load progression as your way of making workouts more difficult, there's kind of it's not that it's bad, but there are other methods too, especially if this has been, your primary thing. So we're looking to make things kind of sustainable here. So I kind of think of progression as kind of like a continuum. So you first have movements. So before you think about how am I going to progress and what is the methodology and the rate, maybe you should think of what is the exercise that you're doing the progression upon, and is it a good thing for you to be doing? This is high-level thinking. Okay? So if you're a discus thrower or an Olympic weightlifter and you do most of your training on Nautilus and Cybex machines, the better you become at progression, the worse of an athlete you're going to be. Because you're starting with the wrong thing. Okay? And so we have this, by the way, funny story, you guys know, I used to have a column in Muscle Media magazine. And I'm going to get in trouble because now this is on film and everything, but now I got to tell you. So I always send these, I like the word movement. By movement, I mean exercise. That's all I mean. I mean exercise. So I would send the articles in, and they would always change it. They would always change movement to exercise. I don't like the word exercise because it's like, it's fraught with emotional baggage, right? It's like you're on the treadmill, you're like the rat on the wheel. So I like movement. You're like, you're doing a movement. That's what you're training for. So they would always change it to exercise. And so one day I asked my editor, and I cannot remember her name, which is probably a good thing. I said, Sue, Sue, sorry. So I'm like, why do they keep doing that? She's like, oh, Bill's kind of, Bill Phillips is kind of, well, he doesn't really, like, what's the deal? He goes, well, he thinks it sounds like bowel movement. True story. That's why he would change movement to exercise, because he thinks subliminally in the reader's mind they're thinking bowel movement. Okay, so first you want to start from the correct movement. You want to make sure that the exercises, now I've screwed myself for the rest of the talk. You want to make sure that the exercises are the right things to be doing to start with. And look, if you are doing primarily machine work, if you're primarily doing single joint movements, and you want to either be an athlete or functional or healthy or happy, it's not so good. So if you're doing that, or if you're doing, God help us all, the aerobic stuff, just stop. Stop doing that altogether. We're just talking weight room stuff here right now. So make sure you're doing the right thing. The next thing is, once you've got the right movements, then you want to master those movements. And mastery is not a destination, it's a process. It's something that even the most skilled athletes and coaches in this room are always working on, but you have to get to a certain kind of stable level of consistency and competency with the movements that you're doing. So if you're squatting, I mean, people squat in different ways, but you got to have your feet flat on the floor. Your knees got to track over your knees have to track over your feet. You need to keep a neutral spine. And I've just lost my mic, but I'm going to stick it in my pocket. All right, so you've got to get a level of competency with the movement. Then, as a way of furthering that mastery, we go to imperfection training. And Keith Sneidman, who will be teaching later, has done an article on this. And the whole idea is there are lots of ways to take that squat and make it more challenging without necessarily adding load. You can hang chains from the bar. Okay? And the chain not only changes the loading, but it's a little bit unstable. It's a little squirrely on you. Okay? You can slightly misload the bar. You can put a 2.5 on one side and not the other side. You can have somebody pulling from the side with an elastic tube attached to your knee. There are different things. Weightlifters traditionally over time have done clean and jerks blindfolded in some coaching disciplines. So this is a way of further increasing your mastery. And Dan is a thrower. We got a lot of throwers here, and I'm a thrower. Throwers sometimes do wacky stuff like throwing backwards and left-handed, and on a piece of wood platform out in the desert, and stuff like that. So and then you go to your normal environment, your normal circumstances, and it's like, this is like dessert. So and then after all of this stuff has been accomplished, then you go to loading, and not necessarily first, okay? And of course, this circle closes back up eventually, because even when you were at high levels of skill, and we've got guys in here who've squatted like 600 pounds and things, but another potential downside of loading is it can fool you into thinking that you're progressing when you're not. Because last week you did a nice parallel squat, 365 for 5 sets of 5, and now you go to 375, and maybe you're not realizing it, but maybe your knees are tracking in, or maybe you're cutting your range of motion. So you're really not doing the same movement. You're doing a different movement. So there's potential when you rely exclusively or primarily on loading as your major form of progression, there is potential to kind of fool yourself on that. So this is just kind of how I think of this progression. Loading, for most people, probably shouldn't be first. And in the sport of Olympic weightlifting, there really is a long tradition of people using just the broomstick or a bar for long periods of time, especially like in I believe in the Eastern European disciplines, right? So, okay, now here's this idea. I've talked many times that one of my favorite ways to kind of analyze things is to look at what most people do and then do the opposite. So here is a way of kind of looking at this, and I want to thank Dan John for giving me the idea for this, because Dan has this statement, and I'm just paraphrasing, but a lot of champions out there have been built on punch clock workouts. In other words, you're not going in looking to make progress per se. You're punching the clock. You're putting in the workout. And there's a lot to be said for that, because there's a lot of consistency behind it. But I started experimenting probably a year ago with this idea of you do a weekly split, and you do your certain exercises on Monday and other exercises on Wednesday and so forth and so on, and you have your set rep patterns, and you record the rating of perceived exertion. Do you know what I mean? The original Borg scale is like 6 to 20, but you can use a 1 to 10 scale. So today I'll be talking about RPEs, rating of perceived exertion. So you write 365, 5 sets of 5, and then you give it a number from 1 to 10 in terms of how difficult it was, right? So the next time you come back, you do the same exercise, the same weight, the same sets and reps, you just do it again. And you record the RPE. And then the next time you come, you do it again, you record the RPE. And when that RPE drops from maybe an 8 to about a 6, now instead of pushing yourself to add weight, now you feel pulled to add weight. And for a lot of people in this room, especially guys, that's good. Wait until you feel compelled to add weight. Wait until you notice a significant increase in your comfort, in the mastery of the movement. Wait until you notice, do you know how like when you do a certain set rep pattern for a squat or deadlift, there's a certain level of intensity you have to bring yourself up to. You have to jack yourself up to psychologically, emotionally. When you notice that starting to decrease and your warm-up's a lot shorter than usual and you just feel like, I'm going to skip that warm-up weight, I'm ready to go. When things like that start to happen, now you feel compelled and pulled to add weight. That's a good thing, especially for guys. Especially for guys. Women, maybe a little different. All right. Oh, I had a little movie for you and it disappeared in our little AV problem. But you know, I had a movie of Troy Anderson. It wasn't anything profane. And you know, do you know what like a renegade row is? So you're in a push-up position and you lift one up and then the other and so forth. So there's an example of just taking an exercise, making it a little bit more complex. It's basically like a seated row. And now you've got this extra level of difficulty because you're gripping that kettlebell or those dumbbells like much harder than usual. You have a stability aspect to this. So, and there are many, many, many ways to increase complexity of exercises. Everything from training in street clothes instead of gym clothes, everything from chains and bands and wobble boards, and these things have applications sometimes. Deliberately misloading barbells, using implements that you're not used to, wider grips. Olympic lifts are great because you can do a snatch, you can do a two-hand snatch, you can do a one-arm snatch, you can do a kettlebell snatch, you can do a dumbbell snatch, you can do a sandbag snatch. You can take your water bottle, your Sparklets bottle, and snatch that. You can, you know, you follow. So there's lots of ways to kind of work on that aspect of the continuum. Okay, escalating density training. There's kind of two different faces to escalating density training. One I've talked a lot about, and the other not so much. So this is what most people know of as escalating density training. And what we're doing here is we are increasing the difficulty of the workout by increasing the density. The load stays constant, the duration stays constant. So in other words, you give yourself what I call a PR zone, a 15-minute period of time, ready, set, go, you go to work. You do as much work as you can in 15 minutes, you're done. So the expansion refers to the fact that gradually, hopefully you're going to do more and more and more repetitions over that 15-minute period of time. And once those repetitions increase to a certain level, then you load. You don't load first, you load later. And this can also be done for maximum strength applications. That's the bullet on the bottom. You take an 85 to 90% weight of 1 rep max. You set up 15-minute period of time, and you try to get a load that allows you to get at least 10 singles, but not more than 15. So clearly, if you get 15, that means you've got 1 minute rests. And once you get to 15, then you increase the load for the next workout, and then you might only get 11. Then you climb back up to 15 again, increase the load, and so forth and so on. So that's just a way of applying this to speed strength or maximum strength training. By the way, don't think that the traditional form of escalating density training is only body comp or only local muscle endurance, because a lot of I believe that neighboring motor abilities have the potential to leak over and improve maybe what is your primary motor ability. So if you're a power lifter, your core motor ability is maximum strength. But training speed strength can cause an increase in maximum strength. It's a neighboring, it's kind of a cousin in terms of the motor ability thing. And if you've spent most of your time maximum strength, maximum strength, maximum strength, your nervous system is kind of habituated to that. And if you do a slightly different motor quality, that kind of wakes things up and it can leak over into the other motor quality. So a lot of people can do well doing this kind of volume sort of training, particularly if you're not really used to it. Okay, here is the other face of escalating density training, which I just call compression method. And this is where not the duration, but the volume remains constant. So in other words, you can do this for standard sets and reps. 5 sets of 5. Do your 5 sets of 5 with 225 pounds on your front squat. See how long it takes you to do it. Next time you go to do it, see if you can do it faster. How long does it take me to, and I have Ashley up here doing some keg runs here. And what's kind of cool about this is anytime you're doing like sled drags or a lot of these strongman type events and dragging and carrying and all that kind of stuff, this is kind of a cool method for that. How fast can you do those 5 repeats? Okay, ladders, all this kind of stuff. Oh, I wanted to go back to and just mention, let me see if I can come back to this. I had the kettlebell there to remind me of something and then I totally forgot. The kettlebell people have this cool thing, it's called a Secret Service snatch test. So it's a 54-pound kettlebell, and you set the clock for 10 minutes, and you just see how many times you can snatch it. And they've got standards and records, and it's nuts. And they had the kettlebell convention in Las Vegas. They actually had a contest. And I know there's a lot of kettlebell folks here, so I just wanted to mention that. That's an example of what I would call expansion method. What do I have here? Okay. I use this device called a Tendo unit, which I think, here's what it kind of looks like. So you have this unit on the floor. It looks like a little dumbbell, okay? And then you have a tether, a cord that goes up to the bar, and then you've got a little LED readout. Can you read that? So this is power in watts. That's a lot of watts. All I did is took the thing on my hand and went like that. You won't get that many watts. All right, and then, so this is the highest repetition in terms of percentage, 1.2 meters per second. I only did 1 rep on this. So it measures mean speed in meters per second, and it measures mean power, not peak, but mean power in watts. So what you can do, and this is really kind of cool because this is kind of a qualitative way of improving what you're doing here. There's a difference, the goal is to put tension on muscles, right? Because the way you get stronger and the way you provoke protein synthesis is by putting tensions on muscles. Well, we're so focused on load, more weight, more tension. Yeah, it's true, but for any given load, the faster you move that load, the more tension you get on the muscle. So if you can do more with less, doesn't that make sense? Doesn't that strike you as conservative and rational and intelligent? So it does to me anyway. So what you can do is you can take, for example, an 85% weight and do sets of 2, and you monitor the speed. And what I do in a lot of cases is we keep the rest interval constant, maybe 90 seconds rest, maybe 60 seconds rest, set of 2, set of 2, set of 2, set of 2. And you're going to have a PR for speed, not for weight. The weight remains constant. And the thing beeps at you when you're, in my personal one, you can set it for whatever you want, but it beeps at you if your speed goes less than 90% of maximum. So now it's kind of cool because load is like you get under that bar and you're like, oh crap, I wonder who's going to win this battle, right? But speed is a whole different thing psychologically and emotionally because now it's a game, it's fun. It's like, okay, let's see how, it's not going to crush you, you don't need a spotter, but now it's, how fast can I make this thing move? And then on your 5th set, it beeps after, and you're like, oh crap, I gotta like figure out how to make this thing move faster. If you get 3 strikes, you're done. If you get 3 beeps in this particular application of the system, 3 beeps, you're done. This is called auto-regulatory training. You don't just say, okay, hey, Bob, I want you to do 10 sets of 3 next week. Well, how do I know how you're going to respond to that? What if the quality of your effort is down the tank after 7 sets? Do you follow what I mean? So, and I view speed as part of this quality. So, it's like the old thing where you put a 5-pound plate on your foot, it doesn't hurt, but you drop it, it hurts. Okay? So that is the whole thing. So if you can get to 10 sets without 3 strikes, then you add load next time. If you get 3 strikes before you get to 10 sets, then next time you try to get to 10. And that might take you 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, whatever it is. Okay? And this way you're not doing like junk reps, in my way of thinking. You're not doing junk reps. Now, there's this question that's been around forever. How come Olympic lifters can train so often? And they can squat 5 times a week, and power lifters typically squat once a week, or, it depends on the paradigm. But the interesting thing about Olympic lifts is that unlike a bench press or a deadlift or a squat, if your speed declines by 10% on an Olympic lift, you miss. If you're doing a bench press, your speed declines by 10%, you just slow down. Do you follow? So you don't have the feedback. So with Olympic lifting and with kettlebell stuff, what's nice about it is you have that feedback. You know when you've slowed down. And I really think that when you can reduce or eliminate the junk reps out of your program, then the cost-benefit profile of everything you do is higher. Do you follow? So in other words, wouldn't you all agree that most of the work that you do should be high quality? This is thinking outside the box, right? But anybody here well, you're a chiropractor. Okay, so if you set up, you're like, okay, I'm going to have an ass-kicking day on Monday. I'm going to get as many freaking patients as I can get into the office, and I'm going to rip them right through. And so by 3 o'clock, your skills are like 75% normal. Would you do that? Okay, so do you follow? But look, none of us would do this in our everyday lives. Why would you do it in the gym? So I just think when your speed at any given load is below maybe 90% of your best, you have been trained. You're trained now. You're done. But if you don't have the feedback, the problem is you're not done. You just do however many sets you're supposed to do, and maybe 50% of it was below 90% quality or 90% of your best effort. You got a lot of junk work going on. What's nice about Olympic lifts, it doesn't happen. When you start slowing down, you miss. Time to move on to the next thing. Was that too long-winded? Okay, good. We did this. Okay, range of motion. I mean, this is maybe obvious, but I just want to kind of remind people of all these methods that we have available. This works well for things like squats. A lot of personal trainers here. Don't you have people, you'll teach them how to squat the first time, they squat down to a high chair. Then you gradually reduce the height, and therefore you go through more range of motion. And if you do more range of motion, you do more work. Now, this is a good thing to get your mind around because there's this thing out there called power factor training. Is that discourse worthwhile? I mean, so what you do, so what they're saying in the book, right, is, okay, normally I can bench three sets of 10 with 185 pounds down on my chest. But if I only go 3 inches, now I can use 405. And therefore, I'm doing more work. But it's not more work because you didn't move it as far. So the definition of work is mass times distance, and then the definition of power is over time. You didn't do more, you did less work. Amazing. But he made more money with his book than I did with mine. So, but look, you can use this. You can use this. Oh, look. So I'm starting to do pistols, right? Those one-leg squats. Well, I can't get down to the floor on those yet. So you go down to a bench, and then once you've mastered that, then you reduce it. Good stuff. And it makes a lot of things doable when otherwise they would not be. So use this method. Once your range of motion is up, then you can load after that. Okay, so here's something that I really like. A lot of guys have like this yang type personality, more weight. I was in the Gold's Gym the other day, so the guys on the leg press, like 1445s on each side, and knee wraps, and his girlfriend sitting up on the. You guys all see this, right? So, but guys need sometimes to be protected from themselves. Okay? So here's what you do. Your 1 rep max is 225. Let's say you're squatting. You're going to say 30 minutes. You do your warm-up, 30 minutes, ready, set, go. Here's what you got to do. This is like eating your vegetables. You got to do 80% for 5 sets of 5, and then you have to do 90% for 3 sets of 3. Once you're done, once you've eaten your vegetables, now you can have dessert if you want. If you've got 7 minutes left and you want to do something nutty, go for it. At least you've done the appropriate work. Do you follow? So if you still have the time and energy to add weight after that and you want to try a single, by all means. But do the appropriate stuff that you should be doing first, and then if you have time and energy. As you might have guessed, I really like time limits on things. Really, really like it. Okay? For lots of reasons. So after exploring some of these non-loading ways of increasing the difficulty of your workouts, I just want to talk about a couple of things here. This is kind of interesting. Let's say today you bench press 185 for 4 sets of 8. And what are you going to do next time you bench press? And the question is, what is the smallest increment that you can achieve? Which one of these patterns results in the smallest amount of volume? It's not so easy to figure out, is it? So let me just give you the answer here. Those are the volumes. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes, you know, the lowest volume here is more weight, but just 1 less rep per set. Sometimes it's interesting. You don't have to make a career out of it, but it's just interesting to look at the different configurations. And here you are. Here's what a lot of people would do. They would just add 1 rep per set, and you get a pretty big increase in volume. So just kind of food for thought a little bit. Did I have something else? So here we go again. You know, here's just a progression that's a little bit more gradual. And you kind of flip the sets and reps around a little bit, which is always a great strategy. If there are any personal trainers here and you want your clients to get stronger, one of the great things to do is if you're doing 4 sets of 8, just do 8 sets of 4 with the same, not more weight. See, the guys will say, oh, well, then I can use 275. No, it's the same weight. Same weight. And because you are now managing fatigue instead of seeking fatigue, now you can get more acceleration on the bar, you have more tension on the muscle, you're not struggling, you don't need the spotter, and you get a lot more chances to practice, right? If you're squatting, like learning how to get under the bar and get the bar correctly and learning how to exit the rack economically and getting your stance and all that, if you do 4 sets of 8, you get 4 times to practice that. If you do 8 sets of 4, you get twice as many practices. Once you're set, it's kind of just up and down. I mean, maybe it's not quite that simple, but you get my point. The setup and the exit are the most complex aspects of a lot of these lifts. Okay. Oh, well, for a second I thought I wasn't going to remember what I was supposed to talk about on this slide. There's, in Olympic lifting, they have this idea of like a long set. Like when Olympic lifters do sets of 2 or 3, they're not really like sets of 2 or 3 that most of us would think of. It's like a single, put it down, you might shake yourself off for 10 seconds, then do the next one. Do you follow? So you can rest, pause between reps. You can do this on lockout type exercises. When you see these guys, I saw a video on the internet a little while ago. This guy squatted like 405 for 20 reps, right? Or 28 reps or whatever it was. But you know, you're pausing in between. On certain exercises, if you have good mechanical advantage on the lockout, you pause. So that's a way to make the load increases more incremental. Add weight, but last time you did not rest pause. The first time you add weight, rest pause. And then workout after workout, try to reduce the amount of rest pauses that you use. Okay? So this is just a great technique. It's so simple, and people don't really exploit this to the degree that they could or should. It's really a great way to go. Okay. I shouldn't have been talking about curves. Maybe some of you guys go to curves. I don't know, but I don't even know anything about curves. Just the name itself has stopped me from going in and checking it out. So, but I've seen a couple of my colleagues say this, and I'll say it too. A lot of times women should just add weight. Just add weight. Not in every case, you know, but women are hesitant about just adding weight. Guys love to add weight and need to do a little less of it. So it's good sometimes when you're a guy, think more like a woman a little bit. Think about working more the qualitative aspect of what you're doing. Women, when they lift, are concerned about aesthetics and form and biomechanics and making everything just right. That's good. That's a good thing. Men, like to add weight. It's good to add weight. So the men should be a little bit more like the women should be a little bit more like men. The men go into the gym, they do heavy weights, low reps, they don't stretch, they don't do any cardiovascular stuff. The women stretch, do cardio, they don't lift. There should be a little, we can learn from each other here a little bit. So even if you're doing all of this in the most appropriate possible way, you can't progress forever. And the reason is I'm referring to Dan John a lot here, so you can see he's a big influence on my thinking, but he's got this whole work, rest, pray, play thing, right? So for every time you push out on the boundary of work, you have to also push out on the boundary of play. So the more work you do, the more intense the work is, the more that you also have to do the active recovery stuff and the cooling off and all of that. And you will eventually get to the point where there's not enough time or energy in a given day or a week to keep doing that. And that's why when I've talked to Fred Hatfield, who squatted 1,014 pounds, he would squat once every 9 days. Took him that long to recover. Kind of a lot of weight, So, and Fred's stance, by the way, it wasn't like this kind. Fred's stance like this, and way below parallel. So, it takes a long time to recover from that stuff. So, you can't continue to progress forever, and that's where some of these qualitative means of progression are really great. You will get to a point, if you've lifted for 25 years, you got to be okay with the weights you're using on some level, and now just try to improve the quality of what you're doing, and the mastery, and the control, and the comfort, and those sorts of things. And it's okay, too, sometimes to change your goals. It's okay to do that. So, just to kind of sum this up, there's lots of ways. There's more ways than I talked about today in this talk. There's lots of ways to make workouts more difficult. Many ways. Don't restrict yourself exclusively or primarily to just adding weight, because there's pitfalls, there's downsides to this. Okay? Stress the qualitative aspects of what you're doing over the quantitative aspects. Always be pushing the mastery level of things, and you always need to go back and revisit. And I have people, I've been doing this forever, but I have people who coach me. It's nice to have coaches and teachers and people who can look at you objectively and see what you're doing, because we all, especially guys, and that irrational exuberance to add more weight, before you know it, you were squatting and now you're doing a good morning. So stress the quality, and always keep coming back and revisiting the qualitative aspects of what you're doing. Consider your experience and personality. The more experience you have, the more you probably have tapped out the more weight thing. Okay? And your nervous system is habituated to that. You should revisit other stuff. Okay? Change the biomechanics of what you're doing. A lot of these exercises, Olympic lifts and squats and deadlifts, there's wide stance, there's narrow stance, there's off of blocks, there's off of the floor, there's from the hang, there's all these different variations. You need to revisit that stuff a little bit. The personality, look, some of us are type A kind of personalities, and you are the people that need to be protected from yourselves. Some of you are a little bit more laid back and just kind of happy-go-lucky, and I'm one of those kind of people myself, and you can, add more weight. When in doubt, add more weight when you're type B. I really believe in that, You have to understand what your personality is like. You see, when I lived in Santa Barbara, there was this trainer who had this guy doing walking lunges across the gym, and he's got these 2.5-pound dumbbells. And they were pink. They were pink. Okay? So one day, I watched this, and it's okay. Everybody needs a starting point. I don't care if you start off with pink dumbbells. Great, no problem. But, 7 weeks later, and the guy's standing there in between sets, and he's got the dumbbell in his hand, he's like scratching his nose. I'm like, okay, that's a sign that you need a kick in the ass. When you can scratch your nose with the after 7 weeks, you scratch your nose with the dumbbell in your hand. Call me crazy, but all right? So consider experience, personality. Look, also, the simple act of using more than one progression strategy will help to wake up your nervous system and put you on the path of renewed progress. All I'm trying to say is there is more to your weightlifting life than just adding weight to the bar, as fun as that is. There is more to it. Okay? And lastly, why do diets fail? Why do diets fail? Okay, the catabolic diet. You hear commercials for this on the radio? Anybody hear this? Some foods require more calories for digestion than they provide in the first place. If you just select catabolic foods, every time you eat, you have a caloric debt. Why doesn't it work? You can't sustain it. Lonnie Lowery will talk about this. Yeah, it works. Dan John, like everything works for what is it, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and that doesn't work anymore. You can't sustain it. So you have to make sure that the methods that you're using can be sustained. It should be a long-term kind of thing, right? So that's the whole thing. 5 pounds a week, 260 pounds in a year, you're setting yourself up for a fall. You can't do it. So look at some of these other methods. Variety goes a long way. Make sure that what you can do is sustainable. And I hope that was interesting for you. And we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you very much. And we'll be back up.
All right, thank you. See you later. So 3 minutes to your next PR, a little provocative title, but we're going to try and hopefully make that come true for somebody today. How many of you are familiar with Z-Health at all? Have any of you seen? Okay. A number of you were on a conference call I did, and some of you may have some of our products or whatever. What I'm going to try and do today is just cover a really basic progression that if you know nothing else, if you never get interested in this stuff, that you can still take something away from the day with you to work with. I appreciate what Charles said, and I want to, first of all, thank him for bringing us in to do this. I love having a chance to speak, and again, hope you're going to have something fun today. You guys all realize you're on a tilt, right? The screen is straight. I found myself leaning, but I wasn't sure if it was just because I was sitting by Dan or not, leaning away. So, when you consider your own training and you consider the things that make you, kind of basically how you feel day to day in your training, how do you normally feel? In other words, what are you driving? Okay. Unfortunately, that's the same car. You got a Ferrari on the top, you got a Ferrari on the bottom. How many of you feel like this? All right. If you train hard, you've been training for a long time. Yeah, I actually was going to put Josh Hinkin's name on the hood of this. But a lot of us wind up beat up from what we do. Most of you, again, if you don't know about me or my background, I am a physician. I don't practice anymore. All I do is teach Z-Health. My other background is as a fighter. I tell people I was born with two interests in life. One was fighting and the other was fitness. And so I've spent most of my life doing combatives or martial arts and also working on the system. I went to chiropractic college to hopefully learn more about myself. And when I got into practice, I spent 4 years in practice. And at that point, I was so frustrated with the whole paradigm that I said, we got to do something different. I have two personality traits that probably drive everyone that know me crazy. I'm probably the most impatient person that you ever meet. And I'm also a perfectionist. I always tell people I plan as I'm walking into the grocery store, I'm already planning how to get out as fast as I can. I'm walking in like, she's old, she'll be slow, trying to pick the right aisle to get out fast. So as a chiropractor, I told people when I first started, my very first day in practice, I told people I'll see you 3 times, okay? I always like to make the cliche, or the statement, chiropractic is a cliche profession. In other words, Dan, I'm Dr. Cobb, I'll be seeing you for the rest of your life, right? Okay, the way the body works, it is so smart that if we're doing something correctly, 9 times out of 10, I ought to be able to make a change like that. The way that happens is by focusing on the nervous system, okay? One of the things that happens in the current fitness industry is that we've become so focused on muscular activity that we've forgotten about the fact that muscles don't have any role to play without the neural feedback that they're getting all the time. Basically, the nervous system rules. And here's an even more interesting point. Most of us as athletes are about performance, right? Yes, no? Okay. Well, here's the truth, okay? Survival is priority 1 in your body, not performance. This is one of my very favorite pictures, okay? I particularly like this guy up here. I don't know what he has in his mouth, but I was kind of glad to see it for some reason. Now, what are these people doing? They're doing exactly what every one of you does. Okay? This is called the startle flinch response. And everybody on the planet does it because it's hardwired into your nervous system. Because survival is your body's number one priority, right? So basically, you got this bat flying in the crowd, and everybody, without thinking about it, without planning it, without choreographing or practicing, everyone's doing exactly the same thing, some version of a flinch to protect what? Their head. Okay, they're protecting the command center. So what's very interesting in this is that as an athlete or someone who is interested in physical training, one of the things that you're always fighting against, believe it or not, is the reflexive activity of your survival system, okay, as you train. Does that make sense to everybody, at least at some level? Reflexes in the body are always active, okay? In other words, your survival system doesn't go to sleep. How many of you have ever, it's nighttime, you forgot to take the trash out, you get everything ready, you walk out the door, dragging the trash can out to the street, and sitting beside the wheel of your car, unbeknownst to you, is a cat, and you drag the trash can by, and the cat jumps out, and you flinch and throw the trash can down, and then what do? You make sure you look cool still, right? Make sure no one saw you do it. Well, your reflexes are always active, and your reflexes are based on what are called receptor thresholds. In other words, how much of a reaction you get, okay, in your nervous system is all based on the amount of stimulus that your body takes in. Now, why is that important? Anyone have an idea? Let me explain it to you. I'm talking to a crowd of 100 people. I guess it's not a Q&A session, is it? So, as an athlete, understand that the receptor thresholds, these are based on all of your senses, sight, smell, vision, but also proprioception. Okay? Does everyone know what proprioception is? Proprioception is your three-dimensional view of yourself in space and time. It is your mechanoreceptors and your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, your joints, connective tissues, all kind of merging together in the brainstem so that your body can close its eyes and touch your index finger to your nose. Okay, that's proprioception. So your receptor thresholds are always active, and your central nervous system is always taking in information. And as it's taking in information, it's making a decision about if something is dangerous or not dangerous. Okay? So if you're in the middle of a lift, okay, let's say some type of heavy pull. How many of you have ever, well, I'm sure no one here has ever missed a pull before, but I have. And so let's say we're making some kind of heavy pull, and what happens? Everyone's kind of experienced that shutdown effect. You're in the middle of a heavy pull, and all of a sudden, the body just has to let it go. Does that make sense? Now, some of you have never let it go, and what happened to you? You got hurt, all right? So that was your training and experience overriding your survival system. Sometimes that's a good idea. Most of the time, it's not. Does that make sense to everyone? Whenever you have, the example I like to give in this is that your reflexive system, your survival system, you can mediate how strong the effect is. And the example I always like to give is, I used to work a lot with military and police. And if you ever work with a SWAT team, the guys, you know what are called door breaching, okay, is where they blow a door off and then they rush in. So you start working with guys who are new, and the very first time they'll be on the stack, and it looks like cops on TV, and everyone's like this. And then, boom, you hear the door go, and if it's their very first few times around a breaching charge, what do you think they do? They do something like this, which is bad when you have a submachine gun in your hand, okay? Not necessarily what you want. And so over time, though, because their experience allows their threshold to change, now they can walk around all day and they can hear that breaching charge. And what happens? Do they still flinch?
Yeah, but they assess the situation more quickly.
Right. Okay, so there's a much smaller flinch. It usually is something like this. If they're not the guy hitting the charge, it'll be, okay, that's their flinch at that time. So what happens then in our body as we train, we become more able to mediate what's happening reflexively. Now, I know I'm talking a lot about a lot of things, but the thing that you want to remember most in this is that your reflex system is designed for short-term benefit. Okay? In other words, I'm walking through the woods, or I'm walking through the desert, and I step on something that rolls under my foot. Okay? My proprioception tells me something's long, and it's rolling under my foot. I don't know what that is, so what am I going to do? I'm not going to go, wonder what that is, right? I'm going to move back away from it because it's more dangerous to mistake a stick for a snake than the other way around. Your nervous system basically has two options in your training. It can facilitate it or it can inhibit it. And it can do that on two different levels, conscious and unconscious. Conscious is the one, conscious you can kind of take care of. Well, some of you, when I said, how many of you have ever had to drop a heavy pull, some of you were kind of like, that happened in 1963. But you haven't done it since because your experience has made it such that you haven't had to. Okay, that's conscious. I can almost guarantee you, though, that neurologically you have some inhibition going on due to something that's happening in your body. Okay? So, again, just think about it this way. Your nervous system can function as an accelerator, or it can put the brakes, hit the brakes. Okay? Most people are performing with the brakes on. That's not an ideal way to progress. Actual tragic true story that happened to me. I was 20. I was moving across country for the first time. Just bought a new car. And so packed up the apartment into a moving truck. Got the tow dolly. Never used one before. Anyone see where this is going? Got the new car, let me emphasize that again, up on the tow dolly. Read the instructions, put it in neutral, forgot to take off the emergency brake. Okay? So 50 miles later, I got out of the car and I'm like, wonder what that smell is. Okay? Trust me, it's not something you want to do. What happens in the body when the brakes are on all the time is that injuries occur. Okay? How many of you have injured yourself training? Okay. If you are not looking behind you in the front rows, look around the room. Have everyone put your hands up again. How many of you have injured yourself training? Okay, very good. All right, so training is a healthy pursuit, right? Excellent. Okay, we want to encourage people to be healthy. So take up training like the rest of us. This is actually something I really do need you to consider. If you're not a pro athlete who is being required to get back on the field today, you need to start thinking in terms of health prior to performance. And I know that, as Charles mentioned so well, that is such an ego thing for guys. It is so difficult to do. But I guarantee you that if you're hurt, you're not progressing. If you're almost hurt, you're also probably not progressing. And so we need a self-sustaining system of some type that will allow you to treat your own injuries and also progress you through whatever it is that you're trying to do. So, this may be a little bit small to see, but can anyone tell what this chart is? If you're not familiar, some people in the back are like getting their glasses out. If you're not familiar with this concept, this is work from Vladimir Janda originally. Upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome. People have become more familiar with that. If you're a personal trainer and you do a lot of assessments, this type of information has become more and more widespread. Okay? Now, whenever I was in chiropractic college, I actually studied with one of Janda's students, also with his contemporary Carl Levitt. Geniuses, brilliant guys. But if you actually read through this, it talks about predominantly tonic muscles, predominantly phasic muscles, susceptibility to fatigue, and it just kind of lays out the muscular patterns in the body. And then again, we talk about upper cross syndrome, lower cross syndrome. If you're not familiar with those, you can call me, I'll explain them to you. But the idea is that neurologically, there are certain aspects of different muscles that take on different characteristics. Now, the thing I always ask, and this is again where Z Health comes from. Trust me, I do have a point to this whole thing. Whenever I was in chiropractic school, and then whenever I was in practice, and then as an athlete for myself, I was never happy or satisfied with how fast I saw results. Okay? And the way my brain works is this. I always say, okay, if I'm doing my job, and my client is doing their job, in other words, they're doing their homework or they're doing their stretches or whatever, and we're still not getting the results that I want to see, who do I blame? I can blame myself and go, okay, I'm just not studying enough, I don't know enough. I can blame my client, like, you're slacking, I know you're slacking, okay? And that just depends on your personality. But my mindset is, I go, okay, well, maybe I can blame the system. Maybe the system just sucks for some reason. And so Z-Health actually came about from looking at stuff like this and going, what's actually missing? Does anyone know what's missing from this chart?
Nervous system.
Okay, the nervous system, and more specifically, okay, there's no mention of joints. So that leads us to the arthrokinetic reflex, okay? As trainers, as athletes, we are so concerned about muscles, right? We want them to be bigger, we want them to be stronger, we want them to be faster, we want them to be whatever. Well, the point is, you can't have a fully functioning muscle if you don't have a fully functioning joint, period. Does that make sense to everybody? How could you possibly have that? And yet, in the fitness fields, in the fitness industry, we don't ever talk about them. What do we talk about? Stretching, myofascial release, self-myofascial release. Myofascial, what does that mean? Okay, it means myofascia, muscles and fascia. You get into stretching. We don't talk about stretching the glenohumeral joint. We talk about stretching the pecs, right? We talk about muscles, we talk about tendons, we talk about ligaments, but we forget that the joints have actually a far more important role than the muscles. And so what's been missing for a lot of you, and from so many different training paradigms, is a focus on joints, all right? So let me explain how this stuff works. How many of you have heard the term arthrokinetic reflex? Okay, arthro meaning joint, kinetic, movement. Nothing too outstanding with the definition, but arthrokinetic reflex is an unconscious reflexive activity that typically, for most of you, inhibits muscular activation, okay? So I need, as we're getting started with this, the whole topic of the title of the talk is 3 minutes to your next PR, so I need a volunteer, because we're actually going to have someone do some lifting, and then we're going to do some exercises, and we're going to have them repeat the lifts, okay? Josh said, oh, Dan, do you want to volunteer? Okay, that's fine. All right. The only thing you have to do is take your shoes off. All right. So as we get started on this, what should we have him do, Josh? We're going to give you this sandbag.
Sure.
And so let's have him. All we're going to have him do is I want it to be a little bit of a grind lift. So instead of a jerk, can you just overhead press that? Okay, good. So we'll go ahead and just have him do a couple more.
Oh, keep going.
Just like 3 reps. So watch him do this. Watch his form, okay? All right, great. Okay, so I don't know what this one weighs, 75 pounds, something like that. So what was the RPE on that for you? Rate of perceived exertion, everyone okay with that? So
6.
A 6, cool. So I'm going to...
Out of 20?
Out of 20. 14. No, it's not a progression. So we're going to give it a 6. And how did his form look to everybody? What's that? It was consistent, okay? Was it like if you were doing a book on sandbag lifting, would you have taken a picture of that lift and gone, this is the perfect lift? Okay, so we got Josh up here going, no, maybe not. All right, but have you done sandbag lifts before?
No.
Okay, so again, this is new to him. So you can't expect perfection in something that's new to people, right? In other words, if I go, I can't really rate your ability to play the piano if I give you a song and you've never played before. Does that make sense? But we're going to say his RPE was 6. And if we were to look at his form, let's say if we rated form on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a 6 or 7. All right? So we'll go 6.5. All right, so Kathy's going to pull Dan aside, and all we're going to do is we're going to take him through a few different exercises. And let me explain, as they're doing that, you guys can be over here. I'm going to move to this side. As she's doing that, I'm going to explain what they're doing and why. The arthrokinetic reflex basically works around or comes from this concept. If you have a joint, that joint has a bunch of muscles and ligaments attached to it, correct? So in this particular instance, this particular lift, what's the prime mover? Basically. Okay, deltoids. Okay, primarily delts, some tris. So if we take a look at this, okay, we've got the deltoid sitting out here. What joint, what's the big joint that the deltoid crosses? Glenohumeral joint, okay, this guy right here. Maybe some AC depending on how technical you want to get. So if there is a problem with his shoulder joint, is his prime mover going to fire at its maximum potential? No, okay. That one's pretty easy to understand, right? Now let's talk about something that's a little more complicated. The back force transmission system. Do you want a chair? Can you just grab a chair for her to use? Something for you. So the back force transmission system, every time your foot hits the ground, force is being transferred into your body, right? And if you've done any study on this, took a physiology class, they'll talk about the ground force effect and the windlass effect and all kinds of things happening in the foot. We're going to skip all that right now because I want to give you a basic understanding of what happens when your foot hits the ground. Where does that force go? It actually follows a fairly predictable pattern. Anyone have an idea? Okay. Actually, these arrows are decoys. It goes in completely off. No. When force enters the ground, it hits your calcaneus, your heel bone hits the ground. Force then goes up the outside of your lower leg, okay, the peroneals. Anyone familiar with the peroneals? The peroneals come up here and they attach to the head of the fibula, okay? From the head of the fibula, what attaches there, you have TFL, okay, or this iliotibial band, and then you also have the lateral head of the hamstrings, okay? So when the force then actually transfers into the hamstrings and it moves up the body, okay? Once it hits, if you know your O's and I's from anatomy class, once it hits the ischial tuberosity, where do you think it goes? Okay? There's actually, it's tough to see, but there's the sacrotuberous ligament, okay, is how it's going to actually transfer now into the sacrum. So it's going to hit the sacrotuberous ligament, it's going to cross over into the sacrum. At that point, it's then going to go up the opposite side of the body. So it's going to hit the lumbodorsal fascia here, travel up, okay, through the lat, to the inferior angle of the scapula, and then from the scapula it's going to go up into the neck or out into the shoulder. So that's a little bit of anatomy, okay? But here's a simple way to remember it. Your body's a big X. Your right arm works with your lower left leg. Your right arm or right leg works with your left arm, okay? So in other words, if you have a left shoulder problem, there's a very good chance, based on kinetic chain functioning, that that left shoulder problem or left arm problem began in your right foot. Everyone okay with that? This is actually force transfer in the body. If you look at it really precisely, that force transfer happens at the sacroiliac joints, okay? The big joints down here. So what we try and do in Z-Health is give you a toolbox that says, okay, I'm trying to facilitate shoulders. So I have some different options as I do that. The biggest bang for the buck, I have to look at the areas of the body with the most joints. Here's one of my favorite things to describe to people. If I have a heavy box, okay, over here, and I want to lift it, I can walk over and pick it up, right? That's going to require a certain amount of force or energy. Basic physics, biomechanics, you guys like me blue? Will tell you that if you tie a rope around it and then tie a pulley to the ceiling and run the rope through it, I can stand here and I can lift that same amount of energy with less effort on my part. And then if I hired somebody to put a bunch of pulleys up here, because again, I'm trying to save work, I could stand up here and I could lecture all day and I could lift that same box with one hand. So in the body, the human body, those pulleys are joints. Okay? And we're going to accept that premise? So where are the most joints found? Okay, there's a hint. They're on the screen. Okay? The hands, the feet, and the spine. Okay? What are the least trained areas of the human body? Hands and feet and the spine. All right? So basically what this means is that the areas of the body with the largest potential for increasing your performance, we almost never train. We just accept that they're there and there's not a lot that we can do with them. So what Kathy's been doing with Dan was mobilizing his feet a little bit. Is that all you've done so far? Which ones did you do?
Middle and outside.
Okay, so we're going to have him go ahead and lift the bag again. 3 more reps. just overhead. Okay, now, what was the RPE for you? Still about a,
They're pretty easy that time.
went up pretty easy. Okay, so meaning
If we're on a scale 6 to 20,
6 to 10.
6 to
1,
10,
1 to 10.
5.
Okay, so now we're to a 5. And what did his form look like that time? His elbow's extended, right?
He's more overhead.
And he was more overhead. Okay, so I'm going to give him a 7.5 on form. Why is that? You can call me up afterwards. I mean, for your talk, you can.
No, I got kind of cool.
Okay. So what we did was we mobilized his feet. Okay, that's one of the exercises in the Z Health Toolbox is teaching you to actively move joints on your own. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to have Kathy do with him is going to be more fun. Oh, he's not a gymnast, right? Okay. We've worked his feet. The next thing we're going to actually do is we're going to work his shoulders. Okay. And Kathy, if you watch over there, she's going to have him doing 2 different types of movements. One is going to be with elbow locked. The other is going to be with elbow bent. She's just going to take him through 3 different figure 8 patterns. So you can watch that if you want. You can listen to me talk because I'm going to tell you, again, kind of the Z Health path that we use to enhance performance. We do a lot of work with pro athletes, college athletes, and we put them through what we call our R-Phase series. R-Phase takes about 25 to 35 minutes. Okay, it's a long process where we specifically go joint by joint through the body. We work beginning at the feet all the way up through the jaw. Our level 2 series is for some of our more advanced athletes. We call that I-Phase. We move from R-Phase, which is rehab phase, to I-Phase, which is integration. Integration uses lots of lunging and twisting and other things in combination with mobility drills where we may be lunging, twisting, doing a mobility drill. Okay? It starts to look a little bit weird, something you might do on Friday night, but we're doing it specifically, okay, for neural retraining because body control, believe it or not, if you're an athlete, is your #1 priority. Most people don't realize that. Most athletes don't realize that. Most athletes want to be stronger, faster. Body control is your #1 priority, even if you're a strength athlete. And that coincides completely with what Charles was saying. Movements, mastery. That's the skill. You want to be really, really good at whatever it is that you do. One of the guys I used to work combatives with, probably one of the top 2 combatives instructors in the world. His name's Tony Blauer. I spent about 7 years working with him, traveling around the country, working with elite military units, SWAT police. Okay. Whenever he was younger, he worked a lot in the sport arena, and he actually spent some time training with Sugar Ray Leonard. If you have any boxing fans in here, Sugar Ray was known probably for having, at that time, and maybe still considered the best jab in the world. Okay. And Tony was actually working with him prior to one of the Duran fights. And he said even between gym sessions, they'd go out and shoot hoops. And so they'd be out on the basketball court shooting hoops. He said Ray would take the ball, he'd set it down about every 4th or 5th shot. He'd get into his boxing stance. He said he'd kind of shake everything loose. He'd hit his fighting stance. And then he said he would actually start to work his jab at about this speed. Okay? Get it out there. And he said you could see him going through different tensioning and movements and body positions. What was he doing? He's working on body control. Okay? The best of the best, trust me, do this all the time. How many of you work with pro athletes? Okay? How many of you work with college athletes? Okay? The better the athlete, the more fidgety they are. And all the time they're doing stuff like this. A golfer, he'll be standing there talking to you and you'll see him doing this. And you're going, would you stand still? Okay? What's he doing? He's practicing his weight shift. Okay? A boxer or a fighter will be standing around, you'll be walking through the store and he'll be walking by stuff going, throwing a little uppercut, throwing an elbow, whatever it may be. Okay? A tennis player, you'll be standing there talking to him and he'll be talking to you and he'll be like, yeah, so the other day, I went out last night and very often in the middle of that, they'll actually stop. And you can see them actually doing stuff like this. What they're doing intuitively is what we teach you to do in Z Health systematically. which is explore your body joint by joint, gain control of it joint by joint. And as you do that, your potential for performance expands exponentially. Okay, we're ready for our third lift here. Okay, what did you do? Just shoulders? Okay. Okay. So RPE on that now?
5, 6.
Still a 5? Okay.
Or maybe, a little less.
A little less? Okay, so we'll call it a 4.8. 4.5. Okay. A little less. Okay. What was his form like that time?
9.5.
Yeah. So I'm going to give that a 9. Okay. All right. So, and what have we done so far? We've done a couple little exercises that look like this. Some exercises that look like this. Okay. So the point is that we're by focusing on the joints and by focusing on the specific pathway in which we're teaching this stuff, which really requires you to think about what you're doing, his nervous system is getting smarter. His nervous system is becoming less afraid of injury, and so what's happening? It's taking the brakes off. Can everyone follow that? Okay. So, as I was saying, here's our pathway. Yeah, we're going to do the neck now. So we have 25 to 35 minute workouts, which take, 25 to 35 minutes. Most people don't have that time. I sat down by Dan this morning. We're sitting up here. He looks at the title of the talk, 3 minutes to your next PR. He looks over at me and goes, "You got anything shorter?" It's like, I don't really have the time. I'm like, thanks, okay. So for him, we're going to do the 2-minute, 45-second one. We next then have something we call our neural warm-up programs, which are 12 to 15 minutes, okay. We're trying to get this down so that you can, instead of having to spend a bunch of time doing an active warm-up, you can do a specific active warm-up that covers every joint in your body that preps you to have this kind of stuff happen. Last but not least, this is actually what we're doing with Dan. Okay, I call them SAPs. Specific activity, high payoffs. I know the exercise that we're doing. I know the prime mover is a delt. So all I'm doing is I'm hitting the different areas. I'm identifying the weakest link. In this case, we didn't. I did not assess him. Okay. Assessment is a art and skill unto itself. It's one of the things that if you're a trainer, you want to be exceptional at. If you're an athlete, you want to be exceptional at. Assessment is something that everyone needs to be good at because it's the only way to be safe as you're getting strong. Okay. But ideally, you're going to identify the weakest link. Next, you look at the end of the kinetic chain. In almost every instance, that means you're going to start at the feet. Okay? Not always, but usually you're going to start at the feet. Occasionally you have to start at the hand. Remember, most joints in the human body, feet, hands, and spine. You start at one of those, you're probably going to have a good effect on the prime mover. After you've looked at the ends of the kinetic chain, you next go to the joint crossed by the prime mover. That's what we were just doing. Right? Okay? Working on the glenohumeral joint because that's where the deltoid crosses. Last, she's actually now moved into what we call the spinal innervation area. So for the delt, the spinal innervation is C5, C6. Okay? So now she's having him do some very specific neck exercises. They look really simple, right? Like this. Okay? No one get excited. If anyone gets too excited as I do rotations, I'll have to worry about you. Why does that work? Okay? Any ideas? It works because we're being very, very specific about posture. We're being very specific about what we call the perfect rep. In other words, rotation, if you're trying to facilitate the nervous system and not create a reflexive effect like that flinch response, then your rep has to be perfect. Okay? So in other words, as I'm turning my head, if I do this, I flex, I extend, okay? If I do this kind of thing or this kind of thing with my trunk, if I do any of those things, I'm actually not going to get the same neural benefit that I get from doing the perfect rep. Now, for some of you, I see a lot of like wrinkled, furrowed brows in here, and that's okay. You don't have to believe me. You can come try it, and I'm happy to demo this stuff for you. We've been doing this. We've been teaching Z-Health publicly for 3 years now, okay? And trust me, it is a very different, contrarian way of viewing fitness. I came at this from exactly the opposite end that most people come into the fitness world. I started in the medical arena, and I got fed up with the medical arena, and I wanted to show people a way to take care of themselves. As a chiropractor, I could lay you out on the table. I could adjust every joint in your body. You probably know at this point that I wasn't a spine-only chiropractor, okay? I adjusted feet, knees, elbows, anything that had a joint, I would move it. And I got some pretty good results. I was pretty happy. But the point is, that the way the nervous system works, basic neurophysiology says this. If I want you to be good at something, in other words, I want you to have a mobile neck, okay? I want you to be able to do anything with your neck that you want. Then I have to show you how to do that actively. In other words, I can lay you on a table and I can adjust your neck. And will that move the joint in the same way? No. Okay? The example I give is I could put you in front of a piano. I could sit you in front of it, put your hands on the keyboard, then I could reach around over the top of you, put my fingers on top of your fingers, and I could start to play a song. We could do that every day for 20 years. Okay? You could pay off my house, my kid's mortgage. Okay? I could do that every day for 20 years. At the end of 20 years, would you be able to play even the simplest song? No. Because your body never learned how to move. And that's really the essence of what we're doing. So we're going to have Dan go ahead and lift one more time for us. Okay, good. Go ahead then. Oh, no. All right, great. So what was the RPE on that now? 3. 3 or 2?
Go
3?
three.
Okay.
The feet.
Okay. And what was his form like on that? Still about the same, right? 9, 9.5? Okay. So, how many reps did he do of each exercise? 2 to 4. Okay. And that's what we're talking about. If you want to start to maximize your performance and also at the same time maximize your health, let me strongly suggest that you start looking at your joints. Okay? There are a lot of mobility programs out there. Okay? Well, I won't say a lot. There are 3 that I know of. Okay? But lots of people are into mobility now. Understand that there is a very distinct difference between general mobility and specific joint mobility training. Okay? In Z-Health, we talk about everything revolving around efficiency. In other words, if I want to hit something really hard, okay, I can do all sorts of stuff that will allow me to hit it hard, but ultimately how much power I impart in an uppercut comes from how efficient my body is. Okay? Great athletes, and again, some of you may not know this, but the best athletes in the world are almost never the strongest on the team. They're almost never the fastest on the team. Okay? Unless it's a powerlifting team. But in most sports where there's lots of movement, the biggest, strongest guy is very rarely the best athlete. The best athlete is the most efficient athlete, which means the athlete with the most body control. So if that's where you're headed in your training, you have to start looking at things that make you more efficient. In Z-Health, we talk about 4 elements of efficiency. Perfect form. Most people that work out, most trainers, I always ask in my classes, I go, how many of you are strict on form? Okay? Trainers, how many of you are strict on form? Raise your hands. All right, great. That's interesting because more people said they were trainers than raised their hands, so that's actually interesting. Most trainers that I meet, I do classes all over the country, I go, how many of you are strict on form? I think I've had one guy in one class go, no, I'm not. Okay? Everybody else was like, oh yeah, I'm really strict on form. And I go, okay, so if I hand you a sheet of paper right now and I say, write out perfect form for the bench press, could you do it? Okay? I would assume most people in this room could, because you train and you study. If you get your 3-day ACE certification, okay, and that's the extent of your knowledge, you can't even pick out perfect form in pictures. All right? So, sorry, that may be a little non-PC, but you have to know what perfect form is if you're going to enforce it for someone else or for yourself. Okay? So the first element of getting really efficient is perfect form. The second element is dynamic postural alignment. And this is the one that probably drives most people more crazy than anything else. Okay? Is there an ideal alignment for the squat? Let's see. Oh, man. Okay? Yes, there's an ideal alignment, and it's dependent upon you. Your body. Okay? If you don't know what it is or how to find it, or you have a reflexive injury or old injury that your body's responding to that doesn't allow you to get in that perfect form or find that postural alignment, well then every rep that you're doing is an imperfect rep. And so what kind of results can you expect? Imperfect. You are what you train. Pretty simple. Okay? The third element of efficiency is what we call synchronized respiration. too much to get into here. The fourth element is balance, tension, and relaxation. Again, another one that drives people that do strength training crazy when they train with me is sometimes I go, you know what, you need to loosen up. You need to not be as tight as you can possibly get. Okay? You have to find the correct balance. And so here's what I'm going to kind of finish all this up with. I can stand up here all day and I can tell you, you need to be practicing perfect form. You need to practice perfect postural alignment. You need to synchronize your respiration. You need to balance tension and relaxation. And if I say that to you day in and day out, and I don't ever give you a drill or show you an exercise or show you a system for getting to that, then I'm not a coach, I'm a critic. Okay? And that's one of the things about the fitness profession that drives me insane. We are hired to be coaches. So if you don't have a toolbox that allows you to see something and go, you know what, I know the drill that will fix that, then you need to expand your toolbox. And trust me, as an athlete, you need to expand your own toolbox for yourself. So again, Z-Health is actually designed literally around that concept that we create movement coaches. That's really all that we're about. We try and give people as many tools as they can for their toolbox so that whenever you see, you know, something that starts with a 6.5 in terms of our rating of form, I know exactly what to do about it. This is a really, really, forgive me for saying it this way, but kind of dumbed down version of what we do, but it works beautifully without assessment. Okay? When you add the assessment factor into it and really know what joints to target, like in Dan's case, just from watching him, we actually need to do a little bit of upper thoracic work, okay, and shoulder blade work. The lift would probably go up, or his RPE would probably drop to a 2. All right, with 3 more reps. What's that? Yeah, so, but we do this stuff all the time so that we can identify that. So you need that assessment. The next thing I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to kind of end on this. It's a strange way to end a talk, but the fitness industry is inundated with information, right? Okay. I'm always amazed. I go to the bookstore, I walk by the magazine racks, and I'm looking around going, holy moly, how can anyone make sense out of anything? Well, there's a great phrase out there that says, never mistake the trademark for the truth. Okay? Everything that I've said today, I'll be honest with you, is a trademark. Is it the truth as far as I know it based on neurophysiology? Yes. Okay? But does that mean that if you hear me speak 6 months from now, I won't say something different? Nope. The idea is that every system that you want to get involved with, and this is why I appreciate Charles so much, I appreciate Dan, Josh, and Keats, all these guys are continually evolving. Every time I read something new, I can see new trains of thought. If you're going to kind of ally yourself with people in the fitness industry, which you already have at some level, make sure that your allies are people who are always changing, because it means that they're still thinking. Does that make sense? If you want more info, you can check us out at zhealth.net. That's our phone number. We have a Phoenix office. I have a Seattle office as well. We're going to be at our booth for basically all day. So if you have questions, be more than happy to work with you individually or talk with you individually. I have about 2 minutes, I think. So I'm just going to really quickly, does anyone have a question I can answer? I know in a big room, yep.
Do we have information on the neurological warm-up?
Yeah, we have it on the back table. Okay. Other questions? Yeah, the neural warm-up is like bizarre Tai Chi. Okay. In other words, it's all of our basic. It's about 80% of our R-phase work done in 12 minutes. Okay. So in other words, it's just kind of this nice flowing series. It starts at the feet, finishes up at the jaw. Okay, and it's just joint by joint by joint progressions through the body, and that's really as an athlete. If we go back to that previous page. 25 to 30 minutes. If you're doing really good mobility training, the R phase, I phase, you need to do it twice a week, roughly. Okay? Everything else then can be done in these shorter bursts and shorter blocks. Now, the only caveat to that is if you're prepping for competition or you're working really, really, really hard, you may have to do a more extensive R phase series at some point. But I understand real life takes time. Real life's always getting in the way of training. And so we've tried to make systems that allow this stuff to happen really fast. Other questions? This is a lot of new information to throw at some of you. Again, if you have questions, please join us at the back. and we'll look forward to talking with you. Thanks.
And we really are that smart too, so Trez is not pumping us up. So I'm Josh Aiken, Keith Snyman here. We're going to talk beyond functional training, developing fun and effective training programs. Basically, for people that were here last year, this is sort of an extension of what we talked about last time. Really what Keith and I have been developing for the past couple of years was created out of a frustration of what's happening in the industry. Basically now we've sort of gotten away from what works. And now we see people doing stuff in the gyms that are almost criminal. And what we want to do is set forth a standard in which to really get people back to having effective training programs. And a novel idea is actually enjoying them too. Because I work mostly with the general population. I'll have a couple of high school athletes. That's my clientele base for the most part. And exercise and activity is supposed to be enjoyable. It's not supposed to be, you get the client walking in, how you doing, John? Fine, I'm here. You want people to look forward to it. You want people to be, because it's supposed to be healthy. Sort of what Eric talked about. It's supposed to be a healthy activity. So that's really where this is stemmed from.
Yeah, I mean, last year, let's get a raise of hands of who was here. Who's at least seen the video of our, okay. So most of you probably saw it. We really didn't get into the fun part of it. So this is going to be much more, a little less theory, but hopefully more applicable. We're going to get people up. We're going to get you moving. And we're going to try to get you to actually experience what fun and effective training is. And we have a technical difficulty. Let's see. Well, what's the first thing you need to do when you get a client? Assessment. So needs analysis of your client. Let's see. I'm drawing a blank. Josh, you go.
Basically what we're saying here is that obviously we all know that assessment is important, right? We all recognize everyone has got little cool assessment charts to go off of. We all have, some certification we've just been to. We're all pumped to go implement it. Thing is, your assessment's got to lead you to some useful information to the training program. A lot of people do these long, drawn-out assessments, and then really has minimal impact to the program that they just created for their client. So not only do you need to analyze and find out what the client needs, you actually have to see how that impacts what you're doing. Because I see the same exercises prescribed to people all the time, even though they just supposedly did assessment. So if your assessment is just to take up time and just to market, if that's what you want to do, great. But hopefully you can develop a system or find a system of assessment that actually yields information that will help you create your program. I know it sounds obvious, but it rarely happens. How many people get information from their assessments that they instantly apply into someone's training program? How many people are sort of frustrated with assessment programs? How many people don't do assessments? Yeah, all right. So you need to do it on some level, even if you're not really comfortable with complex assessment, even if it's body composition, finding out what their goals are. I mean, again, it seems obvious, but my goal and their goals might be different. What they're telling me is important to them, I have to consider and feel is important as well, because it's their program. Doesn't mean I'm not going to sneak in what I think they need, but you have to have that validity as well.
Okay, how many of you guys have heard of this guy?
How many of you can pronounce it?
I think he's Bulgarian or Russian, or I'm not sure. I know he works in Canada, but he has like a periodization concept that I think is phenomenal. And it's basically, he has 4 stages of training for what he calls long-term development. The first one is called fundamental, and you see that fun is emphasized. And he's primarily talking about youth athletes. And most of us, at least some of us, work with youth. A lot of us probably just work with regular clients. But it's really important that there's got to be an aspect of fun to training. Training has become so boring. We're going to get a little more through that later. But train to train would be the next, which would be somebody they're out of that initial GPP early stage. They're starting to lay down more specific biomotor qualities that are specific to their event. Gymnastics, water polo, basketball, whatever. Training to compete is someone who's actually competing. And then training to win is when someone's going for like the Olympics. most of our clients are going to be here, here, and some of us has-beens, masters people. We still try to compete because it's fun. I mean, just because you get old doesn't mean you have to, stop competing. But one of the fundamental things is that, especially in athletes, is people specialize. Just give me an example of a sport where you start so young and you're retired by the time you're 14. Soccer, gymnastics, it's horrible. Then you got all these horrible joint injuries. That's a problem. So, and this all stems from his sort of concept, and you can find his stuff on the internet if you Google him. So, if you specialize too early with people, I think you're not developing what Dan John called last year. I think it was many-sidedness, which is something that we should all strive for. And with some of these implements we have, we're going to. This isn't just doing something different just to be different. You can actually apply some science to it and actually make sense of it. And that leads us to having greater variety. A lot of women are sort of opposed to lifting heavy weights. Does anybody have clients who found that before? Slightly. But yet, if you give them a bag or give them a pink kettlebell or something that looks a little different, and that a lot of the women here, I know you guys are hardcore lifters, but there are women out there who do not like lifting. Your body doesn't know the difference whether you're holding a barbell or a bag of sand. Weight is weight to your body. So, Josh and I basically say, we don't really like what's going on out there. People aren't loading anymore. You see all kinds of circus tricks on different devices and whatnot that may have a place, but people are getting away from stuff that works. Well, we've got a lot of variety in here. And this just kind of reiterates what I was talking about with the early specialization. Early success usually leads to early burnout and early retirement. I've met so many athletes that, probably were on their way to be world class in something, and they quit when they're 14. Tennis players. Look what happened to Jennifer Capriati. She completely just, so that's not a good thing. And most of us probably aren't training a lot of those type of people, but we are training. Each person is an athlete in their own way.
Yeah, how many people here have kids? Okay, how many people train kids? Okay. Most programs nowadays for kids are here, right from day one. Okay, that sets up a horrible, horrible environment to teach many factors. Kids in Little League, Pee Wee football are here. Coaches are taking college, professional level programs and scouting ideas and applying them to that. Kids nowadays don't play. They're in club teams. Probably the worst thing to ever happen to youth athletics are club teams. This will ensure this doesn't happen. Okay? How many kids don't play because it's not fun anymore? Because they're not starting anymore. They don't get to play. Adults are the same way. Most training programs act as though they're this, meaning that they don't have any side of enjoyment. When I talked about assessment earlier, what does that person enjoy doing? How many people ask their client, what do you like to do? I ask all my clients, what do you like to do and what don't you like to do? If they don't like to do it, I may have to hold off on that idea if it's something I believe in highly, because I may have to gain their trust to integrate it slowly. They may find it later. I have so many women that look at a sandbag or a barbell and go, I'm not lifting that. But as I gain their trust and they see the result and the effectiveness and I take their concerns in consideration, they become more open-minded. All of a sudden they're proud of what they can do and they are willing to do this stuff. So this is a very important point you want to make with all your clients and even yourself. If you don't enjoy your training, it's not going to be effective, right? How many people switch program to program because it's not this?
Yeah, if you watch children play, I have two boys, it's a ton of fun, a 4-year-old and a 15-month-old. And, I go out into my garage gym and flip tires and do all kinds of crazy stuff, do my Olympic lifts, power lifts. And he comes out there with me, and he sees what I'm doing, and he wants to do it. Why? Because Daddy's doing it, it looks fun. I don't structure anything for him. I'm not coaching him on technique and trying to. He's not at the point yet, as Eric talked about, where he needs to be doing the perfect rep. His children they're just so governed by excitement. They need to explore. But as soon as things get so structured, that's when all the fun comes out of it. You have to have some structure somewhat to make results in fitness, but too much structure can actually ruin long-term progress. I'm sure that's something Charles probably...
Yeah, I mean, we all like to have our little journal papers out and keeping track of every rep and every weight, and we're the Russian weightlifting team or something. But, I mean, how many of our clients that's their goal? Their goal is to power clean 400 or squat 600. Or how many of them want to come to you and say, I can't play with my kids anymore. I want to be able to have enough energy to play with my kids. You got to start thinking in terms of what are you really giving your clients. This is where we started trying to give in, like Eric did this, about how to organize training without making it overly complicated. I've been doing everything wrong. I must change everything I'm doing. I've been there. It's very frustrating and very defeating. So what we want to do is give sort of a little science and practicality to how to organize this.
Here's kind of where we ended last year. Last year we called these movements the Magnificent Seven. We've come up with other things, sandbags. We've added a new category here. Carrying, dragging, throwing stuff. Sounds pretty fun. But it's not just, what you're not seeing this year is, all of a sudden it's Pilates and yoga lattes, and we haven't of training these movements. And again, this is just the sort of regurgitated thing you're going to hear out of probably more and more people. It's a common theme, that the body knows movements rather than muscles. And whilst these are certainly exercises which say, oh, this works, the bench press works, the pec and the tricep. Well, not if you do it in a way that we would consider more perfect or with, better form. I mean, if you're doing a true bench press, are you just using your pecs? Do powerlifters just? I mean, no. There are your glutes, your abs, your hamstrings. Everything's involved. And so you're really learning how to become more efficient with your whole body when you coach these exercises correctly.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I mean, you can't, sometimes people look at these exercises and they start categorizing them in just purely the prime movers. People go, well, a deadlift, it works my hips and my low back. Well, I believe my hands are hooked to the bar. Just the way I deadlift, it does. It's a trendy thing to say nowadays, train movement, not muscles. But then those same people start breaking down their own exercises by movements. We're going to work the glute med. We're going to hit the lateral hamstring here. I don't know how you do that in a truly functional manner, because the body doesn't work that way. There's a difference between rehabilitation and just everyday training for health and performance.
Yeah, plus you might look at a lot of these type of exercises and, somebody who's kind of gotten away from this and getting more into what sort of the industry calls functional training these days, might criticize, like, say, a squat and say, well, that's a predominantly sagittal plane exercise. Well, apparently. But there's all types of actions going on, muscle actions, that are actually causing torque throughout your whole body. That, like, some of the most, I guess, transverse plane, I'm assuming most of us are kind of familiar with the planes, or frontal plane movements are movements in which you don't produce movement in those planes at all. Does that make sense? It's like a strong isometric contraction to prevent rotational movements. But there seems to be, sort of this idea that, like, we need to be walking around doing all this. I know if you're throwing, or you got the mind, I have kind of a damaged shoulder right now, but no one's going to argue that you use multiple planes, but it's gotten a little out of hand. And people have, they're doing all these really unique, different looking type of exercises. You just have to ask, is that the most efficient use of your time? In some cases it may be, but in a lot of cases it's probably not.
My favorite saying for training both athletes and non-athletes: stimulate, don't simulate. Okay? You're stimulating motor actions, muscles, and so forth that will help your ability to produce the action more efficiently, but you're not going to simulate that same movement in your training unless you're doing specific skill work. That would be a situation where you'd have to use a whole different mindset. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the benefits of training movements over muscles. This is the common theme. Obviously, increased functional muscle mass. You know, I built this muscle on doing a functional exercise, so therefore it's going to work better than somebody who built it doing a dysfunctional exercise. The body doesn't really differentiate like that. What we mean is that when you're spreading the load over many muscle groups, you're more likely to build what's called sort of functional hypertrophy, or hypertrophy that isn't built with the intent of just sheer size or increasing the, like a bodybuilder might have different goals. I mean, that's different. Obviously, they want to still focus on those big lifts, but they're going to train differently because they're after an appearance change, which is more of a structural issue, whereas functional muscle mass is muscle mass that's actually going to be applied immediately. It's going to make you stronger, make you faster. Relative strength kind of comes into that. You're more likely to build better relative strength when you're using those elite 8 as opposed to lots of isolation, bodybuilding type of movements. And that's going to also lead to greater development of neurological efficiency. I know Chad Waterbury will definitely cover this area probably more than we're going to, so we won't even go there a whole lot. He'll have a lot more to say about that. Josh?
Yeah, just to continue, when you start doing movements that we just referred to, along with, Charles mentioned the improvements I made specifically, part of that's also been to make sure that I'm using those type of movements because they reinforce mobility in problem areas that I have all the time. And the more you cut down on the quality of the movement, it seems obvious, but people do it all the time. How many people, for example, just in a simple bicep curl, see this motion when they see any type of full extension? They see people in the gym all the time. Right? It happens, and you can go over all those exercises and say the same thing. Functional balance development. Keith did an awesome job last year of talking about the difference between feed-forward and feedback systems. Basically, in essence, feedback is if you're moving slowly, you have time to react to your surrounding. I mean, if I'm squatting, I'm figuring, oh, that's not quite right. Okay, I can readjust, keep going, and find my spot. If you're doing a very explosive, that's real balance training. You don't step off a curb and go, oh, wait, hold on, got it, right? So you have to have that type of dynamic balance. Exercises like the jerks and the snatches, that's why we separated them from like the deadlifts and the squats, because they're whole entities in themselves. Lately, strong man auto lifting has become really popular. Some people do it just because it looks really cool. We're going to try to put some meaning behind it. Why? You don't have to, number one thing people have is they go, I want to be a bodybuilder, I want to be an athlete. You don't have to be able to explain to these ideas. One is get a grip. Eric hit on a strong point that I was sort of awakened to a couple years ago in my own training. That's important in athletics and lifting. We laugh because it seems like duh, but the biggest thing most people do are what? Wrist curls or rollers. They'll do wrist curls, 15 to 20, I'm good. But the hands are so much more complicated than that. If you only limit to that, you're going to not have a truly functional grip strength, meaning that you get crushing, pinching, and even wrist strength. And I also believe that having poor hands is a reason people have elbow problems, shoulder, and neck problems too. Because you can only look at the chain. If I'm constantly lifting or moving things, what's the next link in the chain? It goes up the simple path. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have the fun part. I've asked a couple people first to go through what we call power circuits. Circuit training usually has that nasty kind of idea that we're going to sit on the machine and do 15 reps, move the next machine, do 15 reps, move on. Circuit training is actually a great way to train people because most people don't want to sit there, do set 5, wait 2 minutes for the next set, then have the towel over their head. I don't know too many of my clients that want to do that. Yet they can have the quality training if we alternate some exercises that don't have the same fatigue. Okay, that's going to make more sense in a moment. So I'm going to have our volunteers come up for a moment. Joanna, Nick, Jason, don't be shy. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to go through a circuit. Ray's going to coach them on how we would do a circuit with some of these odd implements. Each implement is different. You can perform the same movements, a snatch, a squat, a clean. The keys are just the implement changes. This changes the dynamics of the exercise. This will change what you feel. So we're going to have them jump in each on a... I know you can't use the light ones except for Joanna, but she's probably stronger than all of them. Come on in. So circuit training can be great because it can be great for fat burning. Because if you don't think your heart rate's up after this, if they're not sweating, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. Okay? They're going to be working their entire body probably in about 5 minutes worth of work. Okay? So this is something you can do in boot camps that you run, group training classes, or just one-on-one. All right. So sandbag guys, you guys are going to be doing cleans and presses. Medicine ball guy, you're going to be holding Zercher squat. Keg's going to be shouldering 3 times each side. Ready, Coach? So we're going to talk a little bit while they're doing it because we like to watch people in pain. Now you could do this for reps. You can also just do this for time. There's no rule that says this has to be a certain number of reps. The great thing is there are really no preset rules.
And you can manipulate the variables if you're training for a specific motor quality, explosive strength, the maximal strength, just by changing the load, the rest, work to rest ratio.
Now we won't mention Nick picked a light medicine ball there, but that'll go without mention.
And this is not my brother, by the way. I've never seen this guy. I'm the better looking one.
Now, you don't even have to use odd implements. We're just doing it for the sake that people have seen dumbbells and barbells. You could use the same application with a barbell, a dumbbell, and bodyweight drills. This is just kind of more fun.
Whoa.
See? That's why you want to get the sandbag book right back there. No.
Obviously, haven't read it yet.
You
So keep going.
No, switch.
You're on the 10. No, switch them around. That's a 100-pound medicine
Yeah,
ball.
you're on the 100 one.
Now you can see basically we're taking principles of strongman or odd lifts and applying it, to different groups of people.
Okay.
A lot of these guys have never even done a lot of these lifts before,
Go.
as evident as Franz dropping the sandbag on his head. But a component that a lot of people also neglect is this builds great tendon and ligament strength. Old-time strongmen perform feats that most people would be jealous of today. Keep going.
Hey, how
Not
do we
tired
go?
yet.
How do we go back one? To the first one.
And Jason Reimer is my favorite guinea pig because this is his second seminar in a row he's had to do this.
Start getting residuals.
Start getting royalties. But you can understand too, for example, how many people know what a Zercher squat is? Okay. How many people actually teach it to their clients? Why? Because they hate it. The bar hurts on their arms, right? Can you do it with a sandbag? Can you do it with a medicine ball? Anything. But you got to
big rock?
understand, you don't use a great exercise because you're limited by what your client feels. If you can find a way to get around that, you can get them the benefits of a great exercise like the Zercher rep. Franz, you're going to be walking home. And this looks like a little bit of work, right? But we've been going about just a couple minutes. I don't even want to watch anymore.
There's Sean's blood on here. Come on.
And relax. How about giving a big round of applause for that?
Okay,
Hold on.
you guys, hey, wait.
Hold on.
RPEs on those?
Are you in your target heart rate zone? I can't hear you. What? What?
Might be a little bit above that.
A little above. We got to slow down then. Okay. Good workout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Rocket science. How many times, Nick, have you ever done a sandbag lift?
First time.
Okay. I would have normally coached him a little bit. Thing is, if you can make it easily accessible to more people, they're going to get a better response, right? Why do people say they don't use Olympic weightlifting? It's too complicated. No one can figure it out, right? If you are one of those people that just don't feel comfortable teaching it, maybe you can do it with a sandbag or a medicine ball or a keg. and you still reap the benefits.
Or a big rock.
Is that BFR 2000 still available on your website?
Shipping went up.
All right, so what we're going to do is we have plenty of time. We're going to thank these guys, and we're going to get 5 new people to volunteer. Volunteer.
So we need 5 more guinea pigs here.
Debbie. All right, see? Adele, why don't you come on up?
Who's coming?
Okay, everyone wants to play now.
Come on, Cotter.
We have the great strength coach Steve Cotter here today. Yeah, look at that. Applause for him. You can't disappoint now. I hyped you up. Pressure's on. That's my next product, or sandals for the sandbags. Ready? Let's see him go. Pretty cool idea for a group training class. A lot more efficient than maybe doing step. I don't know, just a thought. What are we training here? Anyone guess bicep a little bit? Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you also don't see is the amount of trunk strength that's involved. Okay, this is brutal. What Omar probably felt is, Omar, how much can you squat? He's having so much fun, he can't even answer my question. Omar, what's your squat? Okay, he's a 405 squat. He was struggling with a 100-pound medicine ball in his arms. There must be some benefit there. You're identifying actually functional strength weaknesses there. True, my philosophy on core strength is you must be able to perform and maintain good posture. Okay, it's not about doing crunches or circus tricks. Oh, Steve's just the man. Now pistols. So, could this be for fat loss? Absolutely. Could it be for muscle gain? Absolutely. Could be for performance? I love Debbie. Debbie is a phenomenal. Debbie, how old are you? 28?
55.
She's 55. Pretty awesome, huh? Because people over 30 we have to handle really carefully because they're in little bubbles.
Yeah, the body's pretty resilient if you just train it appropriately.
This is making me tired, too.
Josh, did we bring the buckets?
The buckets are going to be the last product. The heavy one's about 90 pounds. The little one's about 40.
30, 40, yeah.
The nice thing is these are things that are low-cost implements. The point is you don't have to buy thousands of dollars. I remember I just heard a couple strength coaches recently talk, and they were talking about the new products they're using. They're $10,000. That doesn't seem very accessible to most people. At least that, I'm working with the wrong people then. How'd you get out of the heavy kegs there, Steve? Get that chest tall. Now you can teach proper posture. You can take those same components that Eric talked about. It's still important. This is done with meaning behind it. I'm not going to let these guys go if their form goes down, if their posture's poor.
Yeah, using a lot of these type of workouts, I've been working with a basketball kid, and I have some of the postural measurement stuff that I like to use just to kind of see what happens. And basically with no specific postural training other than cueing during a lot of these exercises in 6 weeks.
Poorly. What was his, tell the forward head.
Like his forward head was like 6 centimeters, 6.5 centimeters forward, and just by getting him stronger overhead, getting the thoracic spine up, doing a lot of these sandbags, some barbell work, kettlebells, medicine balls, kegs. In 6 weeks, his posture is like perfect.
So, do you guys have any questions before we pull up some more volunteers? Because we got time. We came to play this time.
Jeff said he wants to play.
Jeff, you're being volunteered. So does this look like something you guys could apply? Something you could use? Something you could... I mean, wait, let's stop for a second. This is hard, obviously. No. Is it fun at all? Well, Omar's a great track athlete, so nothing bothers him. But is there a component of fun to it?
No.
Omar, we're going to have to talk afterwards. That was awesome, guys. Give him a hand.
Thanks,
One
Dave.
more crew. Come on. Look, everyone's looking down
Five
now.
more.
Everyone's like in school and they're hiding behind the person. I can start picking out people. Come on. There we go. We got some brave folks.
Coming up? Okay. Sunshine coming up.
Oh, you big chickens. How many times do you lift the sandbags?
Me?
All right, you should be really good then. We're going to expect like 20 in 15 seconds.
A couple of 50-pounders in my
There you go. So you can see the difference. We got people that are inexperienced, people that can do it.
keep my weights with
It's not too complicated. Franz, you want to go again? All right, we'll go with this group because you all are chickens. So now, could this be something fun for kids? Absolutely. As Keith was talking about, perception's everything. If you see a 55-pound dumbbell, you may think, I know how much this weighs. We go, this is a 30-pound medicine ball. You may have no idea how it feels. That's actually really good.
Whoa.
You're the expert. Come on. You know, especially I train a lot of, housewives and, working women. They are intimidated by things they already have a perception about. I don't want to lift
That's a heavy
300 pounds
medicine
off the
ball.
floor. That's heavy. That hurt my back. I don't know what a 50-pound medicine ball feels like. It's a round little ball. It's a ball. Aha. How's that medicine ball feeling? Pretty good. He can do this all day. He will.
But look how nice, look how good they're squatting.
I know. What does this reinforce too? What are we doing indirectly? We're teaching good lifting, right? For people that have clients that have major flexibility issues, there's a lot of things you can do with these implements that helps you get around those issues while you're correcting them or working on them.
Yeah, not everybody is completely suited to barbell work. You can still load them, overload them pretty easily if you just have some of these.
You notice
Medium
everyone
supplements?
it's hard to see because they've been in the background, but everyone who's lifted a medicine ball, Dan, would you say had a pretty darn good squat?
Yeah, anyway, look, I mean,
It just reinforces good posture.
back of most people.
Right.
Their knees go forward.
Right.
And they do that weird little, gold gym. Yeah, that thing, yeah. But look at that. Yeah, switch that.
So look what you're doing in this time. You're getting them a workout, you're teaching them things, and you're giving them benefits they're looking for. And they're breathing what? Are you guys breathing hard? I wish you could hear it. It's like this.
And one other element that we kind of touched upon last year, you guys go, is the whole concept of imperfection training. Eric talked about a lot about being perfect with your technique, which is extremely important. But a lot of things in real life are not nice handles and dumbbells and everything easy to grab. Things are odd, awkward. If you're a mother, children are awkward objects. They don't always stay still. This really fits the whole notion of imperfection training. It's training from compromised positions, as Steve Cotter would say. There's positions of strength, there's positions of compromise. You're pretty challenged, but the carryover to real life is pretty huge.
Oh, there's a grip on that. There you go. And that's the thing with the whole why we got into this stuff and making this sort of system there, because when I see people in the gym, I see them doing things that are not, I know they can't have any benefit.
Yeah, just a waste of time mostly.
You're seeing people that are literally doing these movements. What are we working on? We're using 5 pounds in each hand. Yes, is 5 pounds legitimate for some people? Absolutely. These people are not people that should be lifting 5 pounds. Your
What's
goal of
funny is-
training should be still to get stronger.
Many people, especially a lot of women I've worked with, I'll hand them 15-pound dumbbells for something, and they'll say, oh, I can't lift that. But yet many things they'll lift in real life are way heavier than that. So they're going to train in the gym lighter than they do in real life. It just doesn't make sense. It makes no sense.
Are we having fun yet? Is that it? Good job, you guys.
Good job, guys. Tough, huh?
Good work.
Tough.
Good work. So hopefully you guys are getting the point that you can do this many different ways. If you only have access to dumbbells, maybe that's what you use. But get creative. We didn't even do a lot of combination lifts. That's one of the nice benefits. I mean,
Hybrids.
we're doing clean and press, but I mean, imagine if you started shouldering it, squatting it, pressing up to the other side, squatting it there. There are so
Jerking it.
many areas that you can hit that normally a barbell or dumbbell would be impossible. Do you use these exclusively? Someone asked me, Josh, do you do any traditional lifting? Of course. I deadlift, I squat, I press overhead with barbells and dumbbells. This isn't to replace what you're doing, it's to complement it.
And we didn't even bring, tires and sledgehammers and other things that just, I don't think that we could have gotten everybody out in the parking lot. It just wasn't really, and I don't think they wanted the tire in here. But not that you need tires, but there's even other things that can, it's almost limitless. Once you sort of understand some of the principles behind it, it's almost limitless what you can do. It's pretty much just up to the imagination of the coach and what does your client need, needs analysis, stuff like
It goes
that.
back to that funny thing, assessment and needs analysis. This is not just random. I mean, if you're using it for a class, sure, there's a sense of randomness to it because not everyone's the same. But are we doing it just because it's cool, because we want to be hardcore? No, because it's addressing some of the needs we have. Stronger trunk, better movement ability, better dynamic flexibility, stronger hands, better postural alignment during movement. Okay?
Stronger cardiovascular system. There's a
I still hear guys breathing
tremendous
hard.
aerobic benefit to strength training that I think is underestimated.
And you won't have to do your cardio after. Right? Yeah. Okay, any questions? Okay. I have to give a shameless plug. I do have sandbags in the back that we do use specifically for lifting. They're nice because they're made to be brought into gyms or outside. They don't fall apart. I have a new DVD that today is the first day of its release. It's a pre-order. We're going to start sending them out very shortly. It's on sandbag training, how to implement and teach in different variations, and some booklets up front as well. So I'll be here if you have any questions, and thank you so much. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, guys.